Have 3 of the trains for Top Thrill Dragster already been sent to Knott's Berry Farm for replacement parts? Is Cedar Point really considering removing Top Thrill Dragster? If they are, when will it be? New rumors on top of the previous ones have now spread fire on social media that the future of the iconic 420-foot tall coaster is in fact in jeopardy, and the fate of the attraction could already have been decided. My name is Brandon, and welcome to my channel, Theme Park Predictions and More. And I'm really glad you're here because I created a video about the fate of the Strata Coaster last fall following the coaster's accident. But now that it's well into the 2022 season, I wanted to share my updated predictions and thoughts with you, and of course, share some predictions for what could replace Top Thrill Dragster if and when Cedar Point decides to remove it. Rumors around Top Thrill Dragster getting removed have really always been there ever since the ride first experienced accidents and minor accidents years and years ago. But really, none of us thought anything of it because Cedar Point would never remove Top Thrill Dragster. For one, the coaster is the largest one in the park in terms of height and the fastest one. Plus, the yellow supports and red and white track really do look iconic on that Cedar Point skyline. But now, with rumors ever since the accident that happened with the lady last fall, things are heating up with Cedar Point and what decision the park's going to make going forward. As we know now, the park is not reopening the attraction for the 2022 season, which in my opinion, I see it both ways. I kind of think it's odd since the park already removed Wicked Twister at the end of last season to not really focus on getting Dragster up and running in time for this season, or at least a mid-summer opening. But yet, if you look at the side of Dragster right now, all you hear is crickets. There's no sign of life whatsoever. After visiting the park 2 weeks ago, it's pretty creepy looking at, to be honest with you. So I really feel like the park would have a lot more urgency in reopening the attraction, making modifications to it, or modifications to the queue line, just to make sure this roller coaster is up and running when they're already down one roller coaster from 2021. But on the flip side, I understand that things like this take a long time because obviously there's going to be some legal issues with the park regarding the incident, and all that takes time, and making modifications to the attraction is of course going to take time as well. But my question is, it's late May now, about to be early June, and yet there's nothing going on with Dragster. Now of course, there's still a lot of time left this year to see some action on the site, but with new rumors coming about now that Top Thrill Dragster is officially going to get removed, really shine some light on this attraction going forward. Again, these are my opinions, my predictions, but it does make sense that 3 trains of Dragster have been sent down to Knott's if that is true, so Knott's can break those trains apart and use them for spare parts for their accelerator coaster. And we all know that ride down in Southern California has seen some mechanical issues this year as well. So it sounds like all the rumors for this coaster have built up over the years, and now we are starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel as for the future of this attraction. Now before I share my predictions with you regarding what's going to happen, what I think is going to happen at least, let's talk about why it makes sense and why it doesn't make sense for Cedar Point to remove Top Thrill Dragster. First off, why it makes sense. Well, for one, it's kind of a maintenance nightmare. This coaster's already had a handful of injuries and accidents, and the coaster was built in 2003, which really isn't that long ago. But accidents create bad PR for the park and for Cedar Fair. And a lot of times when there's an accident on a ride, nothing really happens to that attraction, though you'll see some modifications made to the restraints, the train, or to the ride, which I think that could be the case for Dragster, but that thought is getting weaker and weaker as time goes on. Another reason why it makes sense is because how much money the park spends on this coaster each and every year. Dragster is one of the marquee coasters at the park because when you think of Cedar Point, you obviously think of Millennium, Dragster, and Steel Vengeance. And it's no secret that Dragster is a reliability nightmare because you never know when the ride's going to be in operation, whether it's down due to wind, maintenance, or any other reason. The uncertainty of the attraction really isn't the best. And I know that Cedar Point and Cedar Fair like their reliable coasters. And let's face it, Dragster is not one of them. And people pay a lot of money to stay at Cedar Point, to visit Cedar Point and season passes, and they expect, as they should, Dragster to be open. Now unless, of course, there's weather or strong winds, but that's also part of the problem. Dragster is so finicky when it comes to strong winds because it has to get over the top hat. So it really is kind of frustrating when you really think about it, but when you look at it, it really kind of does make sense as to why Cedar Point would think about removing Top Thrill Dragster. Another reason why is because how much space this coaster takes up. Sure, it's not the widest layout, of course, but it's definitely a huge footprint when you look at how large and how long it is. This is a prime location for the park's next major coaster if they wanted to, and more on that in a minute. Now let's talk about why it doesn't make sense. And in my last video, a lot of people shared their opinions with me on how this coaster is too iconic for Cedar Point to remove, which I totally get and I totally understand where they're coming from. But as a business perspective, this coaster is not the most reliable and it obviously costs a lot of money to operate. On top of that, throw in all the accidents. And we have to bring up the fact that Cedar Point spent $25 million on this coaster in 2003, which obviously is a very expensive roller coaster. But again, we have seen Cedar Fair do this before with Volcano down at King's Dominion. Talk about an iconic roller coaster blasting out of a volcano that you could see pretty much anywhere on that side of the park. That volcano structure has been there for decades, but that didn't stop Cedar Fair for bulldozing the entire attraction. Again, an unreliable Intamin bites the dust. And obviously, we've seen it with Wicked Twister as well. Now, I was able to visit Cedar Point the second weekend that the park was in operation. And let me tell you, the place was packed. There's probably 25 to 30,000 people in the park on the busy Saturday that I was there. And I think that's a sign that Cedar Fair and Cedar Point starting to realize that people are still going to visit Cedar Point even without Dragster. So really, why keep it? The entire Dragster Midway has been left untouched. There's no construction walls around the attraction. You can literally walk right up to the fence to get a great view of the launch area, the station, and check out the Dragster that's staged for photo opportunities. But as soon as you go into gift shops, there's very few merchandise items that show Top Thrill Dragster. And apparently, there's new merchandise rolling out that I've not seen yet, but does show the skyline of Cedar Point without Dragster. Again, that's a rumor, but I feel like you need to know about it just so you're in the loop of everything. Another thing that I found kind of odd was at nighttime, Dragster was not lit up. And that's probably because the ride isn't going to be open at all this year, but I still feel like it's kind of odd to see this giant coaster not lit up at all. So here's my final thoughts on Top Thrill Dragster's future and what could replace it and when. Dating back to my previous video last fall, I think I gave it like a 75% chance of never reopening again. And fast forward to today, I'm going to give it a 95% chance that Top Thrill Dragster will get removed as we know it. Could we see the ride get modified? Absolutely. I would love to see the coaster get LSMs, even though that's going to make the launch not as powerful or intense, but at least the coaster could still reopen and reopen safely. But would Cedar Point want to spend the money on that major modification? I could also see the park keeping the structure but getting all new track for the coaster and possibly making the layout after the top hat include a few major turns and airtime hills. Kind of like what Kennywood did with Steel Phantom when they converted it to Phantom's Revenge. So I could definitely see Cedar Point doing that, at least modifying the launch and possibly getting new trains for the coaster. But again, Dragster as we know it, I do not think it's going to ever reopen, unfortunately. Now, let's talk about what could reopen the coaster if Cedar Point decides to not renovate the ride and just remove it completely. This area is massive, and I recently did a video on how Cedar Point can actually fit the world's longest, tallest, and fastest full-circuit giga coaster in this plot of land. As you can see, the station will be located here, and the layout will go over part of Millennium Island and behind Camp Snoopy, then cross back over the water onto Millennium Island, completing the circuit of major airtime hills, small airtime hills, and some of the best turns and elements on any roller coaster period. This Giga Coaster would not only be reliable, it would also give Cedar Point 2 full circuit Giga Coasters that both complement each other perfectly. And for those of you who think that's kind of a crazy idea and why Cedar Point would do that, well, just look at Kings Island when they built Diamondback and then Orion, because stat-wise, those coasters are very, very similar. So they've done it before, which tells me that it's a possibility that they'll do it again. Again, these are my thoughts and these are my predictions, and I definitely think the best bang for your buck for Cedar Point to bring in a new world-class roller coaster that's gonna flop the turnstiles and offer great capacity would be a B&M Giga. Basically, Theory 325 on steroids. Now, if you want to see a full POV of this awesome creation that Escape Designs and I came up with, you can find that link in the description of this video. So I definitely recommend checking that out, as we pulled the measurements and there is room in this location of the park for a coaster of this size. Now, if it's not a B&M Giga, what other type of coaster could fit here? And I think if Cedar Point removes Dragster, obviously they're going to have to fill it with a very tall attraction that you can see all around the park. So could it be an RMC TRex? Now we know RMC and Cedar Fair doesn't have the best relationship right now, but that's about to change because Worlds of Fun is about to open up an RMC Raptor. And I'm like 85 to 90% sure that is what's coming next year to the park. So RMC and Cedar Fair, I believe, have fixed their issues in their relationship, and apparently they're going to be working together again on future coasters, which is a great thing for you and I. So in regards to the RMC TRex, it's all about the timing of this coaster and when RMC wants to release it. Because I do not think the very first RMC TRex is going to be a 500-foot tall coaster. And I think that Cedar Point needs a new coaster very soon, especially with Wicked Twister and Dragster potentially leaving. So I bet Cedar Point will not look for the RMC TRex to open on this location as the park's next roller coaster. Which leads me to this, that if Cedar Point is going to remove Dragster, they're going to do it at the end of this season. You know, when the park is closed, because of how big this ride is and the complicated removal strategy that's going to have to come with it. With that said, I believe we could see a coaster open in 2024, but most likely 2025. That is, if the park's next coaster is actually going to be built in this location. So now that you know my thoughts and predictions, it's time for me to hear yours. So please share them with me in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching. Remember to smile today, think positive, and keep riding coasters.